Good evening, dear students. We are in the chapter wrist and hand complex. Today we will discuss about the functions of the wrist complex. So in the functions of the wrist complex, we will be looking into the movements of the radiocarpal and midcarpal joints. Already we have studied about the structure, the ligaments and the important ligaments of the radiocarpal as well as the midcarpal joints, and also the important muscles which are crossing, namely the FCU. So the motions at the radiocarpal and midcarpal joints are caused by a rather unique combination of active muscular, passive ligamentous and joint reaction forces. So three factors which are working together. It's a combination of the three factors. Which are they? Active, which is a muscular activity, which is active muscular activity, contraction. Passive ligamentous stability. Joint reaction forces such as compression and distractive forces. Although there are abundant passive forces on the proximal carpal row. You know the proximal carpal rows are scaphoid, lunate, tricutral and pisiform. So abundant passive forces are acting on the carpal row. No muscular forces are applied directly to the articular bones of the proximal row. Proximal row, as earlier we have studied, has good ligamentous connection between the uh, which is also what we call as the radiocarpal, between the radius and the distal end of radius and the proximal carpal bones. So here there is no much importance of the muscular forces, but there is passive forces of the that there is a ligaments. Given that the FCU muscle applies its force via the pisiform to the more distal bones, we already studied when we are discussing about radiocarpal joints. We did not give much of a importance for pisiform bone because it was enveloped or surrounded by soft tissues, and it acted most along with the FCU, that is flexor carpi ulnaris muscle, during the contraction of this muscle, and therefore stabilizing. So much of the stability of the radiocarpal or the proximal carpal bones are through the passive forces of the ligaments. The proximal carpals therefore are effectively a mechanical link between the radius and the distal carpals and the metacarpals, to which the muscular forces are actually applied. So what we have to understand is the proximal row of bones, the carpal bones, namely scaphoid, lunate, tricutal and pisiform, act more like a mechanical link rather than a joined unit. So they are a mechanical link between radius on the proximal side, distally the distal carpal bones, and then the metacarpal bones, to which means the metacarpal bones, lot of muscle forces are acting. So the muscle force will transmit from the radius to the mostly to the metacarpal as well as the distal carpal row, and further to the phalanges. So that means that the proximal carpal row, that is scaphoid, lunate, tricutal and pisiform, act like a mechanical link. But the trapezoid, capitate and hamate, which is the distal carpal bones, along with the metacarpals and the phalanges, act more related to the muscular forces. So to make it more effective, we'll put a study. Guilford and colleagues suggested that the proximal carpal row is an intercalated segment. It is called as an intercalate. Don't ever forget about this here, because you have to remember that the carpal bones are smaller bones. Nowhere else you will find such smaller bones which has to take so much of force. So the other bones are mostly are larger bones. So in the upper limb, the carpal bones are, even though they are strong bones, they are small bones. So the proximal row, according to Guilford and colleagues, are called as intercalated segment. So intercalated segment is a segment, it is intercalated. It is actually mechanical link which is like a sandwich inside the between the radius and the distal unit. Distal unit we can call the distal carpal bones and the metacarpal bones. A relatively unattached middle segment of the three segment linkages. So if you take this as a three segment linkages, this one, the proximal carpal row, is a relatively unattached middle segment. Ruby and associates concurred. Concurring means accepting. They are I concur. When somebody says that I concur means I support what the other person say. So Ruby and associates also concur to what Guilford has already said, that the proximal carpal row functions as an intercalated segment between the distal radius, that is the TFCC, that is triangular fibrocartilaginous complex, and the radius, and the relatively immobile distal row. When compressive forces are applied across an intercalated segment, you have to remember the force applied is a compressive force applied across an intercalated segment. The middle segment tends to collapse and move in the opposite direction from the segment above and below. Remember, now I will show you the picture later, but just to try to understand it. Compressive force means two segments are pressed together, compression applied across. So which is compressed? The proximal carpal row, that is a scaphoid lunate equatorial, that proximal row, which is we already called as intercalated segment, is compressed by one side. It is a radius and TFCC. The other side is a relatively immobile. See, we are using the word relatively immobile, means it is not immobile. Relatively means compared to the intercalated segment, this is relatively immobile. So that means that the intercalated segment is moving more. How do they move? During compression, the middle segment tends to collapse and move in the opposite direction of the segment above and the below. So that means that the intercalated segment during compression will move in a different direction from that of the radius as well as the distal carpal row. You have to keep that in mind. For example, application of compressive muscular extensor forces. You have to remember, compressive muscular extensor forces means any force that is an extensor which is trying to extend the wrist joint, that may create compressive force across the biarticular wrist complex, would cause an unstable proximal scaphoid to collapse into flexion while the distal carpal row is extended. Now we have to already what we have understood is, whenever there is a compressive force, the intercalated segment will collapse and move into the opposite direction. So during extension, what it should do? The other two segment, the distal carpal row will move to extension. But what will happen to the scaphoid, which is a proximal carpal row? It will go into flexion. So that is what you have to understand. It will move opposite to the direction of the movement of the wrist joint. An intercalated segment requires some type of stabilizing mechanism to normalize combined mid-carpal or radiocarpal motion and prevent collapse of the middle segment. So the intercalated required. So that means that if they are collapsing too much, then they will collapse and they will fail. There will be a failure. So it cannot happen. So there should be some kind of a stability that should be there. This stabilizing mechanism appears to involve the scaphoid and its functional and anatomic ligamentous connection both to the adjacent lunate and to the distal carpal row. So if you remember the ligaments, we have studied all the ligaments. Most of the ligaments of related to the proximal carpal row are mostly related to scaphoid and lunate. So these ligaments have a connection between them, and they give a stabilization mechanism and to the which is connected to adjacent distal carpal row. Much of the literature proposes that the head of the capitate frequently referred to as keystone. Now I told you that in the proximal carpal row, important we need stabilization, right? If there is no stabilization, what will happen? This will collapse. The wrist joint will go dislocated. This happens for some people in injury. It will get dislocated. That means that after that, the person will not have a good wrist joint. He or she cannot, do activity properly. There will be pain. So for that, it should not happen. How it will not happen? Because during the flexion or extension, compressive forces comes, the intercalated segment, mainly the scaphoid, lunate, and tricutum, they act as a intercalated segment, but they move in the opposite direction of the movement of the wrist joint. But if they move like that more, it will be a collapse and it will dislocate. That is not happening because we have ligamentous, anatomical ligamentous linkages support. So after that, another important bone in the distal row is called as, what is they usually in the most of the literature, means most of these studies are calling it as keystone. Keystone means they are referring to capitate. Capitate, which when we studied the anatomy, I already told you the capitate is a very important bone and it's the largest bone also. It's placed in the, it's almost like it's a center of the wrist joint. So the keystone, they are calling it as the keystone of the wrist, may serve as a location of coronal axis for wrist extension bar flexion. In the coronal axis only we are getting wrist extension and flexion, and the anterior posterior axis of radial and ulnar deviation. So only we have 2 degrees of freedom. So in one is, in the coronal axis you are getting wrist extension and flexion. You are getting wrist extension and flexion in coronal axis, and then you are getting radial deviation, ulnar deviation. Deviation of the wrist towards the radius is called as radial deviation. Radial deviation to the ulnar side is called as ulnar deviation. Which axis does it happen? It happens in the anterior posterior axis. Okay, as well as providing the rigid center of the fixed carpal arch. Who is the rigid center of the fixed carpal arch? Keystone. Which is that bone? Capitate, the head of the capitate. The capitate bone is the, which is a part of the distal trapezium, trapezoid, capitate, and hamate. The capitate is the distal carpal row, the third bone, which is also called as the keystone. So what are the motions present in the wrist joint? So we'll study the biomechanics of it. Flexion and extension of the wrist joint. During flexion or extension of the wrist joint, the scaphoid seems to show the greatest motion of the 3 proximal carpal bones. During flexion and extension, in the proximal carpal, we are talking only about 3 proximal carpal bones. Mean that we are not talking about pisiform. I already told you they are not considering pisiform, is they are considering pisiform as a separate unit in along with the FCU, that is flexor carpi ulnaris. So they don't consider their biomechanics. Anatomically, we have 4 carpal bones in the proximal row, but biomechanically we are talking about 3. Among the 3 proximal carpal bones, which is the most mobile or the greatest motion is scaphoid, whereas a lunate is not at all, comparatively not moving. So scaphoid moves more, then the tricutum, and then only the lunate. Pisiform moves in a different biomechanical aspect. Some investigators found that flexion and extension of the radiocarpal joint occurs almost exclusively as flexion and extension respectively of the proximal carpal row, whereas others found simultaneous but lesser amounts of radial bar ulnar deviation and pronation and supination of the 2 or all 3 proximal carpal bones during radiocarpal flexion bar extension. It is a bit confusing. I will clear it out. So these studies are talking about how, when the wrist and flexion and extension is happening, how the distal carpal bones are moving. So we'll talk that in the next part.